All right, so we're going to talk about the volume of a sphere right now. And the volume V of a sphere is the product of 4/3 pi and the cube of the radius of the sphere. So the only dimension here that we really need to worry about when calculating the volume is the radius, okay? When we dealt with cylinders and cones, we had to deal with the radius of that base circle and the height. But here, there's only the radius that we need to worry about. So the equation can be written as V equals 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay, so we take r to the third power and then multiply it by pi and by 4/3. So the first example, we have two spheres here, and the instructions say find the volume of each sphere, round your answer to the nearest tenth. So my recommendation would be to find the exact volume, so that means in terms of pi, and then use a calculator to round to the nearest tenth. Okay. So we always want to start by listing our variables and writing the equation that we need. So in this case, we need the equation that we just looked at. V equals 4/3 pi r cubed. We're basically finding V, and I'm given r. So r is equal to 4 centimeters. It's given right here. And we don't know V, which is fine. So now what we can do is just plug in our value for the radius into r cubed and then rewrite our equation. So that's going to look like this. V equals 4/3 pi and then 4 in parentheses cubed. Remember to always plug in with parentheses. So now I'm going to simplify this. So I know that 4 to the third power is 64. You could have done that out if you wanted to. So now we get V equals 4/3 pi times 64. And then what I can do is I can multiply 64 times this fraction. Well, 64 times 4 is 256. So I can rewrite this as V equals 256/3 pi. And this is our exact answer. We can't simplify this fraction, and we have it in terms of pi. So my unit is going to be centimeters cubed. If we look back at the diagram here, we're dealing with centimeters, so our volume is going to be in centimeters cubed. And this is our exact answer. But the instructions say round to the nearest tenth. So what we need to do is we need to plug in this value right here into our calculator and then find it to the nearest tenth. So we'll go to our calculator. So we're going to do 256 divided by 3 times pi. We could include the pi on the top. Yeah, that's actually what I'll do right here. So we'll do 256 times pi, and then you can hit equals and then divide by 3. And then we get 268.08. Now to round to the nearest tenth, we look at the tenth, and then we look at the digit to the right, which is the hundredth. This is 5 or more, so we're going to round up. So our final answer is going to be, our volume here is around, let's see, what was that? 268.1, because we rounded up. And then we need our unit, centimeters cubed. So that is for part A. Now if we go back up to part B, we can do the same process. So the only difference in part B is that we are now given the diameter, okay? So that is the diameter. That's going all the way from edge to edge through the center of the sphere. So we're still looking for volume, but this time I'm given the diameter, which is 10 feet. This means that I have to just cut this in half in order to figure out the radius. So the radius is just half the diameter, so that's going to be 5 feet. Common mistake would be to plug in 10 for the radius here. So now that I have everything listed, I'm going to rewrite my equation. So that's going to be, once again, volume equals 4/3 pi r cubed. And then I'm just going to plug in my radius again. So I'm going to plug this in here. And I'm going to rewrite my equation. V equals 4/3 pi times 5 to the third power. Okay? So now I can keep simplifying. 5 to the third power is 125. And I'll rewrite the rest of my equation. Put that in parentheses because we're multiplying. Don't need to do that though. All right, so now I want to multiply 125 times 4. Well, we can kind of do some simple math to figure out that this is going to be 500 because 4 times 100 is 400, and then 4 times 25 is 100. So 100 plus 400 is 500. So I get V equals 500 thirds pi. And once again, this is our exact answer. Now we want to look at our unit. We're dealing with feet here. So our volume is going to be feet cubed. So that is our exact answer. But once again, we want our answer rounded to the nearest tenth. So we're going to go over to our calculator again. And then we'll do 500 over 3, or really 500 pi over 3. So 500 pi, and then divided that by 3. And we get, for our final answer, 523.59, blah, blah, blah. But I want to round to the nearest tenth, so I look at my tenth, go 1 over to the right, which is 9. So because it's a 9, I'm going to round up. So it's going to be 523.6. So V is about 523.6 feet cubed. So this is our rounded answer. Now we have a sphere that we are given the volume and we don't have the radius. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down our volume equation for the sphere again. Volume equals 4/3. I'm going to zoom in on this a bit. Pi r cubed. Okay? And I don't know what my radius is, but I do know my volume. My volume is 288 pi. And if we look at the instructions, it does not tell us to round, so we're looking for an exact answer. And since we have a pi in our volume, it's looking like that the pi's are going to cancel out, so we're going to hopefully get a rational number here. So I'm going to plug in my volume here, which is 288 pi, and then this is equal to 4/3 pi r cubed. And you know what? I'm going to write r in red because that's what we are solving for. So now we want to say what is happening to our variable. We are multiplying it by 4 and pi. We're dividing it by 3, or the same thing as multiplying it by 1/3. And then we're also cubing it. So we want to cancel out these operations in the reverse order of operations. So we would cancel out our multiplication and division before we would cancel out the cube right here. So what I would do is I would actually try to cancel out all of this multiplication and division in one step. Now you could do it all one at a time. You could divide by 4, then divide by pi, then multiply by 3. But we could do this all in the same step. So since we're multiplying by 4/3 pi right here, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of that. So multiplying by the reciprocal of 4/3 pi I would really want to multiply by 3 over 4 pi. So I'm going to zoom in first. And then what that's going to look like is I'm going to multiply by 3 over 4 pi on both sides. And then what happens here is the 4's cancel on this side, the 3's cancel on this side, and the pi's cancel on this side. And then what happens here is we get these pi's cancel, and then this becomes 3/4 times 288. And that is all equal to r cubed. So now I'm looking at this fraction 3/4 that is being multiplied by 288. Well, I know that 4 goes into 288, and I know that it goes in exactly 72 times, because if we divide a 2 out of it, we'd get 144 here, and a 2. If we divided another 2, we'd get 1 and 72. So this becomes 3 times 72, which is equal to r cubed. And then I can just multiply 72 by 3 to get a 6 and 21 right there, which is lucky for us because 216 is a perfect cube. So we do 216 is equal to r cubed right here. And then to cancel out something that's being cubed, we take the cube root of both sides. And I know that the cube root of 216 is 6. So 6 is our r value here. And then if we look back at our units, way back over here, we're dealing with inches cubed for this volume. So that means that our 6 is going to be in inches. And this is our exact answer. We did not need a calculator there. All right, for this example, we have a hemisphere, which is half of a sphere, and which is the top of a silo, is the hemisphere with the radius of 12 feet. What is the volume of the silo? Round your answer to the nearest 1,000. So we have the cylinder. Right here, I'm going to zoom in on the cylinder. The cylinder goes up to here, and then we have the hemisphere, where we're given that the radius is 12 feet. Okay, so that means that from the center, which is right here, to there, so that's going to be 12 feet. Okay, which means that the rest of this height is going to be 52 minus 12 feet, so this is going to be 40 feet. Okay, and since we have the radius of this sphere, which is 12 feet, the hemisphere, which is 12 feet, this is also going to be the radius of the cylinder. So that's very fortunate for us. So we're actually going to break this down into two questions. We're going to find the radius, find the volume of the cylinder. So find the volume of the cylinder. And then volume of the hemisphere. So volume of a cylinder, the equation for that is V equals pi r squared h. And then for the hemisphere, well, for a full sphere, it's 4/3 pi r cubed. But for a hemisphere, we have to divide that by 2. So we have to do, so 4 divided by 2 is just 2. So for the sphere, it's 2/3 pi r cubed. And now we just have to plug in what we know. Well, we know that the height of this cylinder is 40. So I'm going to write that over here. So we have V equals pi. And then, so the height is 40. And then we know that the radius is going to be 12 feet. And it's going to be 12 feet for both. So it's going to be 12 times, or 12 squared, times 40. And then for the hemisphere, we do volume equals 2/3 pi times the radius, which is 12, cubed. Okay, and then when we add these up, that's going to be the volume of that's going to be the total volume. So we get volume, our total volume, V sub t for total, is equal to pi times 12 squared times 40 plus 2/3 pi times 12 cubed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug this into my calculator because it says to round to the nearest 1,000. So the best way to write this would be to do pi and then parentheses 12 squared, close the parentheses, and then times 40. I'm typing on my keyboard right now if you're wondering where these numbers are coming from. And then for a fraction, I always do parentheses, so 2 divided by 3. That's my fraction. And then times pi again. And then in parentheses, I'll do 12 to the third power. And I get 21,714 point blah, 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 blah. And it says to round to the nearest 1,000. So what I'm going to do is go to my 1,000 and then go 1 to the right, which is going to be a 7. So that's 5 or more. So I'm going to round up to 22,000. So if I go back to my notebook here, our total volume is around 22,000. And then if we look back at what we're given, our unit is feet. So this is going to be 22,000 feet cubed.